All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Chuck Cooper. Chuck, welcome. So awesome to have you today.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we talked about a month ago. So I'm excited to be here.
Same here. And I'll tell you, I got to read, because a few of my guests have come from this source, which, Andrew Ailman has this thing. I don't know what he calls it, but I'm on his mailing list. I'm on his email list. So once or twice a week, I get these emails from him with a list of people that I might be interested in interviewing for the podcast and stuff. And that's how I found you when I went through that list. You were one of the persons that were highlighted. And I'm like, oh, this Chuck guy, this looks like interesting. I went to his directory and checked you out, and through that made contact with you. And then we had, like you mentioned, we had a conversation about a month ago. And I'll tell you, that was so awesome having that conversation with you and getting to know you, because what I gathered from looking at you and Andrew's directory was like, wow, here is a gentleman who really places a lot of value on relationships. And of course, that was confirmed when you and I spoke before. And then even this morning, when my assistant was like, hey, Kevin, do you have some kind of a bio or anything on Chuck? And I'm like, well, let me see what I can come up with. And when I went to your website and read your about page, I was like, wow, that was really moving for me. and so I was looking forward to this conversation before. But now, after reading your about page, and of course, I know I mentioned it to you before we hit the record button, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
It's gonna be fun for sure.
So why don't we start, Chuck, with just I'll turn it over to you so you can just set some context here and share a little bit of your background, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you to do what you do. And we'll just kind of start there today, Chuck.
That sounds great. So my story is I grew up in the Midwest, in a small community, in an agriculture community, and was involved in a family-owned business from the time that I was very, very small. So, it's one that I've always been very, very passionate about being involved in as a small business owner. And so that's probably one of the ways I describe myself, as I'm a recovering entrepreneur. I've been involved in 6 different companies where I've had ownership roles in each of those companies. And it's ranged anywhere from the ag industry to hospitality to today with what I do through Whitewater Consulting is HR consulting for small and mid-sized companies. And so when I go back and retrace that journey, which I had the opportunity to do in detail last year, as I spent 16 months publishing a book, was being able to look back over life and seeing the highs and the lows throughout that time period. And so when I look back through the highs, there's been so many moments where I look back and think I was on the mountaintop. And then there's been a few times where have made mistakes personally, which has taken me into some really deep valleys. So it's been one that I came through that whole introspection and really came out of there with a sense of gratitude. So with the work that I get to do today at Whitewater Consulting, I get to work with people that I consider my heroes, which are small and mid-sized business owners. And we are able to help them everything that is people related within their companies, from HR compliance to benefits to talent acquisition and retention, company culture, leadership coaching. We get involved in each of those areas with our clients. And so I get to get up every day, have the honor and the pleasure to be able to seek out, business owners like that and be able to help them achieve greater, in many cases, achieve greater significance, as well as, financial gains as well. So it's been, I love the chapter of life that I'm in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, when I read your about page on your website and just Well, for one, you're a family guy like me. You got kids, you got grandkids, and you know, I think it's just really, you know, something when we can have a business that allows us to be able to not only support our family in a way that makes us feel good and all of that, and also gives us the luxury of being able to be there for our
Yes,
kids, for our spouses, for our grandkids and stuff. And of course, you've got pictures on your website of your family and stuff. And you know, because when we have that, our clients, the people that we serve, they end up getting us at our very best because we don't have this, not this separation of business and personal life. It's all just our life. and
exactly.
and it's a very powerful dynamic to have. And you know, and a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't have that. They don't have that. And
Yeah.
there's something to be
Yeah.
said.
I get the opportunity to talk with business owners every day, and to your point on that, so many times we want to when we get up and we want to go to work, we want to put this mask on that this is who we are today,
Yeah.
and then when we go home, we take that mask off and we're somebody else. And I've found as have searched for that sense of contentment that I have searched for many years. It's been once I was able to just relax and just become authentic. It made a huge difference, not only in my personal relationships, but also in my success that I was able to, accomplish with my clients. And so it made life so much easier just being who you are and being comfortable in your own skin.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, now that we've got a little bit of context set, we'll shift gears. I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, have you ever met or been introduced to a person or persons that have completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Chuck, I'm really excited to hear your story and your experience around this, as well as be able to give you the opportunity to honor some folks that have had such a major impact on you and on your life and on your business.
I really appreciate the opportunity because I think it is so important that we do take the time to, again, reflect back on those people that have come into our life that's had such an impact, and to be able to, either at least pay tribute to them. And I think that's what I want to be able to do here this afternoon. As we talked about earlier, trying to be able to narrow this down to one was almost impossible for me to do, because I've had some different chapters of life where I've been really fortunate, where other people have come into my life at a specific time when there was a specific need, and they were able to bring some real comfort and some real guidance and counsel that was really important for me to have at that moment. So, when I look back over life, I think that, as an entrepreneur, and I go back into one of the first businesses that I was involved in. We had a really successful company that was in a small community. We were one of the largest employers in that area, and we, as business owners, and this includes myself, we let pride and ego and success cloud our vision as far as who we really were. And so we made some really poor financial decisions as we enjoyed that success. And at the end of the day, that business, we ended up selling the business to really, for the most part, to be able to get out from underneath the debt that we personally created. And so some things that I learned as I went through that journey was I went from being, on a mountaintop with a really once in a lifetime opportunity to basically blowing it. And so I was in this really dark valley that I was in for several months. But what I learned as I went through that was, one is, being an entrepreneur or being a business owner is not meant to be done alone, that you really need to have people around you that can give you counsel. So one of my takeaways from those moments of being in the valley was really focusing in on looking at particularly for me, looking at men that were older, that had more experience, that had achieved, levels of success that I was looking to do myself. And so I was able to identify, in this case, some gentlemen that came into my life that really were there to be a sounding board. They allowed me to they gave me the opportunity to be able to really communicate what my experience was and what I was thinking as I went through that, and to be able to deal with the that burden that I carried as far as letting my family down and putting my family in really difficult situations. They were able to be there to listen to that and to say, just because you went through a moment of failing doesn't mean that you are a failure.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity to learn and to be able to grow from this. And so what they did was they really encouraged me to really focus in on who I was, how I wanted to live life, and what I wanted to achieve. And then they served as my board of directors, as far as kind of being my accountability partner, and also serving as my guardrails to make sure that I didn't repeat those same mistakes, for as we move forward. So as I went through those moments, some guys that, that I want to really focus in on were guys like, the names are John Anthony, John Mandeville, John Lake. So it's all the three Johns. They
Three
did a great,
Johns,
three
okay.
Johns. And those three gentlemen, again, they made a huge difference in my life, and really, again, brought a lot of wise counsel, and also accepted me for who I was at that time. They didn't hold the mistakes that I made over me, but they said, and again, their philosophy was, we've all made mistakes. If we've lived any type of life at all, and particularly as an entrepreneur, you're going to make mistakes along the way.
Yep.
It's okay. Learn from those mistakes and move forward. So one of the CEOs that I used to work for, he shared with me, he goes, look, as you're serving in this role, learn to fail fast, learn from it and move on. And by doing so, you pick up so much wisdom. And so I've had the pleasure of being able to share a lot of those mistakes that I've made and the lessons that I learned from that with my clients.
Yep.
And so it's really helped to establish a peer-to-peer relationship and a deep level of trust with them early on, because I'm coming in being, this is who I am. These are the mistakes I've made. I'm not just talking about the success that we've had. And
That's
so
right.
when I look at, again, at that chapter of life, the three Johns were really instrumental for me. But as I look, as we move forward, so the next chapter was moving away from that, being involved in that company, and relocating my family from Illinois to North Carolina.
Okay.
And obviously when I did that, there was we didn't know anyone here in the Carolinas. We knew one family in North Carolina when we moved here, and it was one we had to develop a lot of new relationships. So trying to understand what I was going to do at that point, how I was going to provide for my family, I needed counsel as I went through those days and those months.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just one that every time that I have had a need, for some reason or another, another person, and particularly guys, and they seem to come in groups of threes, have come into my life at that moment to really kind of walk with me through that part of the journey. So I'm extremely grateful for that. So, what, Kevin, when I go back, I was grateful for the dad that I had, for the grandparents that I had, because they established the values and the work ethic and really put me on a firm foundation. And then, as we went from those people that were central to my life, then it comes back to, those people that have come in at my deepest, when I had my greatest needs. And I just feel like that in so many ways, think that those people didn't come into my life as an accident. They came in at that time. And I firmly believe that for me, that it was my faith that was leading me down that path to intersect with those men at that specific time.
Yeah. That is really, and I know you and I had touched on that before we hit the record button today, that nothing happens by accident. My friend Sean Stevenson, before he passed away, this would have probably been 6 years ago. He made a comment to me that really, had an impact. And he said, Kevin, he said, nothing in my life ever happens to me. Everything happens for me.
Okay.
And when I heard him say that, I was like, man, I want to live by that. And that's not always the easiest thing to do.
Right.
Because in order to live by that, it forces us we have to look at every situation, especially situations where on the surface we're like, this ain't happening for me. But it causes us to ask, how is this yet another example of this is happening for me, not to me, and I can tell this is just causing you to think of something too.
Well, it's one of those things that the question that I always ask myself as I go through when I see something happening, and I feel like I'm going down, either the wave that I'm riding is about to crash, or I'm about to go from a mountaintop moment to a valley moment. It's not a matter of why is this happening, but it's a matter of what am I supposed to learn through this time, and learning how to be able to really just to be calm and remain, just really focused on the moment, and remain really present with my family and my clients as I go through that period. But when I go through it, it's not one of those moments where I become really anxious anymore. It's just one of, okay, what am I supposed to learn as I get through this? And it gets revealed just in a matter, a short period, because that moment is typically very temporary. It's not something that's going to last forever.
Yeah. That is some really valuable insight, because I know, we were talking about, a dark period that I had gone through. And of course, looking back on that, it has been so instrumental for so much of the work that I do, and being able to communicate and interact with other people far more effectively. And and of course my knee-jerk reaction is like, wow, I don't ever want to go through something like that again. But yet what you just said, and being able to ask ourselves, what is the big lesson here? What am I supposed to learn from this? And that just, even when you said that, I'm like, what a calming feeling that offers us,
Right.
that even in the midst of chaos or turmoil or difficult times, just by asking ourselves that, that like, okay, you know what? Just take a deep breath. It's all
Right.
going to be okay. I'm going to come out the other side of this, and I'm going to be a better person because of it,
Exactly.
and be more valuable to those that I serve as well, and yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
I think one of the other big lessons that I learned in that valley moment that I had whenever I was in my late 20s was that as I came through that, again, I carried a lot of the that burden of just personal responsibility, guilt. I went through that range range of emotions where I was very just frustrated. Then I became angry. I never really became depressed, but I became really uptight about what the future was going to look like. And I owned all of this. And I think, one of the things that that a good friend of mine that was walking through that time with me, he helped me kind of walk through that process of being able to forgive myself for the decisions that got made and for the way that things turned out. But being able to lift that burden off of my shoulders, and to really focus on the fact that I have failed, but I'm not a failure, that I've got a lot of life ahead of me that I can have have the opportunity to recover from and to learn from. That was, a huge lesson for me. And that's something that as we went through the pandemic here, a couple of years ago, I had a couple of business owners that were really struggling with that same thing, that they had made some mistakes and they were about to lose their business. They thought they were about to lose it. And the reality was they were carrying this huge weight on their shoulders. And we talked about just being able to forgive yourself and to be able to learn, to be able to move forward, because it wasn't going to be a life-ending moment for them.
Yeah.
And so they were able to learn to realize that and actually walk through that journey themselves. And now that we've come out the other side of this, that's one of the greatest, one of the greatest sense of fulfillment that I've had is be able to hear them come back to me and say, thank you for being there at that moment that we needed you to be able to walk with us and help us to realize that, it was things that are outside of our control, that even though it had a negative impact, we came through this and we're a better person today.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So if you think of, I mean, because you've mentioned a number of relationships here, but I mean, if you think of like one relationship as an example,
Mhm.
that has allowed, that your relationship with this person has allowed you or the two of you together to make such a bigger impact in this world that hands down would have never happened had you not met that person. Can you share a story or an experience around something like that?
So I've got a friend here in Charlotte. His name's John Smoke. We both were we were both working for a company. He was working for a company in the Midwest. I was working for a company here in Charlotte. But we were meeting every week for breakfast. Both of us, we shared that we both had aspirations for wanting to start our own companies again. But we were neither one felt like we were ready to take that next step and actually launch a business. And it was a moment where, as I was really trying to figure out kind of what I was going to do for this next season of life, he came to me on a Friday morning and he said, look, I think now is the time for you to seriously consider launching your company. And so we talked about, the reasons that I shouldn't do this. And so he came back and he goes, I feel like this is it. And it was a culmination of a lot of conversation. And he had heard me talk about the passions that I had and really where I was focusing my what I wanted my legacy to be.
Okay.
And when we started talking about legacy, it's really built on three things. It's built on faith, family, and love. But he goes, your passion for where you really want to spend your time and help is working with these entrepreneurs and small business owners. And he said, there's such a need for this. And this was in 2018. He goes, there's such a need right now for the work that you do. He goes, I think you can go out and make this happen. Fast forward one month, I had two other gentlemen that came to me and said, we've had a lot of conversations on this topic of what do you want? And we feel like that now is the time for you to launch your company. And so it was just an after confirmation for me that I needed really just to step out and trust that this was going to be okay. And what was interesting as I went through that was the first year, it was really, really slow from trying to start from ground zero to build a business. And then the pandemic hit, in 2020. I was just on the verge of trying to close three of my largest accounts when we went to shelter in place. And I felt like at that moment, this was a moment where it was either going to be a confirmation that it was the right thing to do to launch this company, or it could have been a mistake. And the reality was all three of those deals closed. All three of those companies became clients. You're still clients today.
Wow.
And it was just confirmation to me that, that it was the right time to do what I'm doing. But I would not have taken that step if it wasn't for John Smoke and his guidance and his encouragement to follow through and to go out and to launch.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, he was in a very, very similar situation. And I have talked with him many, many times about, I think your business and your model that you have is going to be a huge success. And he goes, I have a wife at home. I've got three boys that are about to go to college. These are the reasons that I don't feel like right now is the right time. Yet he stepped out and he did it. And he's got a very, very successful company today. So
Wow.
that was a moment right there, Kevin, where we were able to be there for each other, to encourage,
Yep.
to challenge, and to really, help walk together on that path of starting our companies. And if it wasn't for John, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and because of that, and who both of you serve, when we start looking at the ripple effect of the work that we do, and specifically in the work that you do and the work that John does, because of the companies that you serve, and the people under the roofs of those companies, and people that are even not under the roofs of those companies, but are family members, or how the ripple effect of what both of you and John have started and began is absolutely huge. And the reason I like to ask that question is because when we do start looking at the ripple effect of what we do, uh, and the impact that we make, it really is. It's like so much bigger than anything we could possibly even comprehend.
Mhm.
But and I'm one of these guys. I'm with you. I love the entrepreneurs that I get to serve. And I know that I count every one of them as friends. They're all people that I would totally invite into my home for dinner with my family. In fact, many of them have been into my home, and so and that's what I really want to impress upon people listening to this is like because as us entrepreneurs, relationships are the most valuable asset that we possess. Everything stems from that. And I just want to thank you, Chuck, for just taking the time to have this conversation and help, because I know anybody listening to this is going to be inspired to place an even more intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their lives. And so thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And what's been interesting, Kevin, it's, again, so many of these people that have come into my life have been men. But I would also be very remiss if I did not mention that as I've gone through these moments, the journey over the last 40 years of life, through the highs and the lows, that I've got a spouse and a wife that has walked side by side with me through each and every moment.
Yeah.
And she has been my greatest cheerleader and greatest encourager, and also has brought some wise discernment and wise counsel to me along the way as well.
Yeah. They say that behind every successful man, there's a supportive woman. And that is definitely the case for me too, So,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
we have 7 children. 4 of them are grown and out of the home and on their own and got kids of their own. I got 6 grandkids, but we still have 3 under our roof. And I'll tell you, my wife before she did well. I mean, 2008 was her last year working outside of the home,
Okay.
and so it's been a little while. But I'll tell you, I think now as a mom and a grandma, she works harder than she ever did at any other job.
Yeah, I would say my wife's actually a small business owner herself. So she runs a business out of her home. She was a registered nurse for almost 30 years. And then she started a bakery out of her home
Wow.
about 10 years ago. So she is a sugar artist, and she's amazing baker, but she's also an amazing wife, mom, and grandmother. So she is the perfect piece to fill out our family and to carry on the legacy that we're building together. So I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for her.
Yeah. Well, Chuck, for anybody listening to this going, man, Kev, I sure do like Chuck. I like what he stands for. I like the way he shows up. How can they get more information on the work that you do?
So probably the best way to get in touch with me is I'm obviously on all social media platforms, including LinkedIn. But my website that you can go to is chuckcooper.info, or my company website is whitewaterconsulting.net.
Okay.
And my email is chuck@whitewaterconsulting.net. So they can feel
Perfect.
free to reach out in any of those modes or mediums that they have access to.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, any last thing you feel led to share, Chuck, before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I would mention, Kevin, is again, I think that life is so much more fulfilling when you have people, when you have rich relationships, and so I really applaud you for the real purpose behind your podcast, and being able just to allow others to be able to come on and to be able to pay tribute to people that have been important and had such an impact on their life.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things that as we look at 23, being able to have an attitude of gratitude, and being able to do something each week, I think is something that has had an impact on me and has really helped deepen some, and also it really started some initial relationships last year that are just becoming very, very important to me as we go into this new year. So I just challenge everybody to focus on people and to look for ways to serve, and to be selfless in those acts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chuck, thanks again for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.